Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to the World Forestry Week event on Global Forest Resources Assessment. My name is Tiina Vähänen. I'm the Deputy Director of the FAO's Forestry Division. Before we start, just a couple of procedural matters. This event is being held in English, but it is simultaneously interpreted in French and Spanish. To access the other language version, please use the interpretation icon on the bottom of the screen. The audio and video are available only for the panelists, so therefore we kindly ask you to post your questions and comments using the question and answer button, QA button, which is also found on the bottom of the screen. We have dedicated some time to the questions and answer session at the end of this event. But we will most likely not be able to address all the questions during this session, which is a short session, but we will use the posted questions and prepare answers and publish them at the event's website. So I will have a brief introductory PowerPoint, and then we'll have Anssi's presentation, and then we will move to a panel discussion. So this event introduces the developments in the Global Forest Resources Assessment, FRA as we call it, and specifically the key milestones of the FRA 2020 process. And we will hear from our panel feedback from the reporting countries, partner organizations, and data users. And we will also have a chance to discuss options for the future reporting cycle of the FRA. So let me start by introducing the milestones of the FRA 2020 process. The process started in 2016, so FRA 2015 was evaluated, and we started the scoping for FRA 2020. 2017, we had an expert consultation in Finland, and we started the implementation of the reporting platform. Then in 2018, we launched the reporting process and regional reporting workshops. In 2019, we did a massive effort on reviewing, validating, and analyzing the data and the actual report writing. And 2020, this year, was the year of the public publishing the results and disseminating. So what was new in the 2020 FRA process? In country reporting, during the FRA 2020 process, FAO supported the reporting more intensively than ever before. We had 1 global and 9 regional workshops, and they were participated by 240 people from 144 countries. We reduced the number of variables from over 100 down to 6. A new online platform for data entry and review. This was with a view to reduce the reporting burden on countries and to facilitate communication between the reviewers and national correspondents. And with these improvements, we saw clearly a higher number of countries actively participating in the reporting. And all this resulted in improvements both data availability and quality. And so what was new in communication? The results of the country reporting have been published during the last months. We started by publishing the key findings in May this year, including an innovative digital report. And in July, we published the main report covering 236 countries and territories, and we published the FRA database that contains all the information the countries have reported to FAO. They are available in easy-to-use digital format. This platform allows the users to access country-specific data as well as global and regional summaries, and it has a bulk download functionality. All data are in a non-proprietary format. Now, what's new in remote sensing? I trust you all already, of course, know that the FRA 2020 will include a remote sensing survey. This survey has basic 2 objectives. One is to enhance country capacity to use modern remote sensing data and tools. And second, to produce global and regional data for forest area and changes. And this is in order to increase the knowledge on drivers of deforestation. The experts participating in this remote sensing survey exercise are currently analyzing 430,000 samples using an open source tool developed by FAO with the support of NASA and Google. This is under the FAO's Open Forest initiative. For now, more than half of the samples have been analyzed by experts from countries via more than 30 national and regional workshops, and the results will be published in 2021. So as a conclusion, we have seen a process that differs from the previous FRA in many ways. Process has been streamlined, the scope has been revised, and we have had much stronger capacity development component. And the digital innovations have changed the way the data were reported, reviewed, and validated, and now are being disseminated. So let us now hear some reflections on these changes from our panelists. We actually have a great panel today, composed by senior representatives of reporting countries, organizations, and data users that have had different roles in the reporting process. Let me introduce them. We'll have first Roman Michalak. He is from the joint UNECE FAO Forestry and Timber section from Geneva. We have Florence Palla from the Commission des Forêts d'Afrique Centrale, COMIFAC. We have Belinda Margono, Forest Resources Monitoring and Inventory from the Government of Indonesia. And we have Jenny Wong, United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change Secretariat. Dear panelists, I guess you are ready for some questions. Let us start. Roman, you are a member of the partners of the Collaborative Forest Resources Questionnaire of FRA. Tell us a few words on this partnership and how the FRA 2020 reporting process fit in that context. Also tell us from your perspective how the joint data collection and review went and what are your thoughts for the future for this collaboration. Over to you, Roman.
Thank you, Tina, and good morning, colleagues. So what is the CFRQ partnership? Let me start first with deciphering this mysterious acronym. So the CFRQ stands for the Collaborative Forest Resources Questionnaire, which is a name of a coalition of regional organizations and processes involved in the forest reporting, which at some moment decided to cooperate with the FAO on forest resource assessment. The CFRQ is composed of the Forest Europe, the International Timber Organization, Montreal Process, Observatoire des Forêts d'Afrique Centrale, and the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, the UNEC. Here I would like to mention that the UNEC has been cooperating with the FAO through the Joint Forestry and Timber section, actually since the onset of global forest reporting in 1947. And we joined the CFRQ and welcomed this initiative as an enhancement of our cooperation with FAO. Why we find this initiative as important? The background of this cooperation was that both FAO and regional organizations and processes were interested in the same or similar data. And they realized that if this work was done jointly, it would have brought many benefits. First, for FAO, because the collaborative work, I believe, supports the FAO by strengthening its connection with regions and capacity to assist countries in collecting data. Then for partner organizations like us and processes that can obtain information in much more efficient way than doing this individually. Foremost, the collaborative reporting significantly supports countries by reducing national reporting burden compared if they had been approached by several organizations asking again similar or same data. Finally, we find this process also as beneficial for the overall community because as a result, in addition to avoiding overlaps, it results in a better quality, dissemination, and visibility of collected information. How the collaborative reporting works in practice. An example perhaps would be a reporting in the Pan-European region, which was even more complicated because in the 2020 cycle, it was performed together with the regional pan-European reporting on forests and the SFM. So the CFRQ framework allowed the three CFRQ partners, which were FAO, Forest Europe, and the UNEC, to join forces to work in the coordinated way. The CFRQ partners designated experts to assist countries in developing their reports and jointly organized regional capacity building workshops. You mentioned 9 of them, so 2 of them were in our region. They were organized in Geneva for the European countries and in TPGC for countries of the Caucasus and Central Asia. We need still some time to fully learn about the effects of this cooperation and results, but already now we can share the information that we achieved in 2020 cycle, the highest ever rate of reporting in the region. 50 out of 56 UNEC countries provided national data. Thinking about possible ways of improving the FRA reporting, also they were highlighted in your introductory, but I would focus briefly on technical aspects. I still see a need for having better IT digital tools to reduce especially repetitive work that would remove unnecessary burden from countries. And an important step in this direction we see was building the FRA data platform, for the first time coordinated with the pan-European one, which provides a solid basis for developing really better tools for future reporting. So we are looking forward to the next cycle, but now maybe taking this opportunity, I would like to thank FAO, global and regional partners, but foremost national correspondents and forest surveyors for the great work and cooperation in the 2020 cycle. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you very much, Roman. And I'm really happy to hear that you particularly mentioned that there's now currently the highest rate of the reporting ever in UNECE through this collaboration and innovation. So happy to hear that. Florence, COMIFAC, you are not a partner organization of the Collaborative Forest Resources Questionnaire. I try to avoid the acronym here, so I will spell it out. So Florence, you have been involved in the FRA capacity development and in review of the country reports. It would be interesting to hear what is COMIFAC's view of the Collaborative Forest Resources Questionnaire, partnership, and the FRA process. Florence, over to you.
Thank you, Tina. Good morning, everybody. Let me switch in French to have some answer of your question. La COMIFAC, à travers son observatoire l'OFAC, a effectivement contribué au processus FRA de 2020 et ça a été une initiative plus consolidée que le processus FRA 2015, à savoir nous avons une position maintenant de reviewer pour le reporting et au niveau de la plateforme. On a pu aussi renforcer les capacités de certains collègues dans certains pays de la région, sachant qu'il y a 10 pays, avec des pays francophones et des pays hispanophones. Le processus FRA 2020 aussi a été très intéressant dans le sens où on avait déjà convié depuis février 2018 un expert de la FAO Rome pour participer à la révision de nos indicateurs OFAC, ce qui nous a permis d'aligner tous nos indicateurs à ceux du FRA. Et je vois que le COFO 2020 a été publié et ça nous a permis aussi de démarrer avec le tas des forêts 2021 qui va être publié par nous l'année prochaine. En ce qui concerne la collaboration, donc le partenariat, nous avons beaucoup apprécié le fait que la communication a été effective, dynamique. Nous avons été informés de chaque étape. Il y a eu d'abord des ateliers au niveau des pays en intégrant les points focaux FRA dans nos groupes nationaux de collecteurs et de producteurs d'informations. Nous avons aussi été conviés à un atelier régional qui s'est tenu à Libreville, au Gabon. Et nous avons par la suite aussi, en plus du processus FRA 2020, avec l'appui de la FAO, pu aligner les indicateurs non seulement du FRA, mais aussi ceux de ODD 15 sur les forêts, ce qui montre que cette synergie, dès le départ, est très importante et nous espérons que pour la suite du processus, nous allons toujours être impliqués comme ça a été le cas cette année. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Florence. Very nice to hear your experience, and in particular describing how these regional and obviously country workshops have been useful. And you mentioned also the more effective and fluid communication between the FRA process colleagues and the countries, but also among the countries. So very useful indeed. Belinda, you have contributed to the FRA process as a member of the FRA advisory group and have also participated in the Global Remote Sensing Survey. So what are your views on the FRA process and the role of remote sensing?
Thank you, Tina, for the question. So referring to the FRA process of 2020, I would like to say that we, Indonesia, has provided regular information to the FRA through the FRA online reporting platform, including to this FRA 2020. And we follow the guidance format and communication made through the FRA focal point. So we has also used the global core set of the forest related indicator as requested. So for the FRA reporting, I think we are quite happy with the process so far. Regarding to the role of the remote sensing, the global remote sensing survey. So in principle, we support the FAO effort to develop the operational tools by using technology and digital innovation for data collection, including conducting the global remote sensing survey. However, some notes need to take into consideration if the approach will be used for the FRA reporting process in the future. As we said that it might be in 2021. Because the process of using the tool and such technique for us, it's benefit more into the country capacity building. So rather than into the operational monitoring processes, because all the processes we have made through the existing system. Actually, the concern is more into the definition used so far and some technical detail, because take into consideration, for example, in our country, we have a country definition of the forest that not exactly the same with what we have in the FAO, as it based on the working definition that actually define forest as the land area of more than 6.25 hectares. So that is our minimum mapping unit. The trees higher than 5 meter maturity in situ is the same with the FAO, but the canopy cover we use more than 30%. So it's not 10%, because if we use 10%, meaning all in the entire country will be the forest. So this definition used as a basic data and information on forestry that match the ecological condition and represent also the unique ecosystem side. So that's the situation that I would like to share during this event. The FRA process by giving role of the remote sensing is promising. I believe so. So that's the good thing. However, the uniqueness of each country in conducting the use of remote sensing for national purpose need to be recognized. Other thing, following the process, the involvement of the interpreter, I would say our local interpreter, in the process is more into taking and generating the sample. And they are not yet, I would say, not yet directly on the data processing and analysis. So this situation is actually would be very difficult to get the feeling of ownership and the deep understanding of the process itself. Especially, we know that right now, there are many process of independent review ongoing, and we need to, put the capability and the capacity of the people in the country So meaning the capacity and the capability in country is very important. So in this case, for the FRA 2020, we use for operational uses, we use the existing National Forest Monitoring System still. The system based on remote sensing that Indonesia has been developed for national purpose. As it is fit the country condition requirement and will continue, we will continuously use for country monitoring system. So that's the situation right now. But I think the how would you say, like the transition from what we already have and developing the capacity will be our concern. But in general, we are happy to be part of this process, including the transition itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Belinda. We are fully aware that Indonesia, you particularly have a lot of country capacity on the remote sensing and a lot of experience. And as you said, you are using remote sensing for your national purposes. Obviously, as we know, we will not be publishing country reports from the remote sensing survey. It will be a global and regional level. But you mentioned something very important, that there needs to be the link also to the national processes. And also you mentioned very importantly the variety of definitions. Basically, certainly your country is not alone in this process of having different definitions globally. So FRA is simply trying to offer and use for the FRA purposes the definition that we have. But obviously countries have their own definitions. But thank you sharing for your thoughts, and also that you felt the capacity development have been useful, although you already have a very, very good capacity in Indonesia. Let me turn to Jenny. Jenny, UNFCCC is one of the substantial users of the FRA data, and we thank you for that. We have had a really great cooperation over the years. It would be interesting to hear a bit about the UNFCCC Secretariat view on the role of forest under the Enhanced Transparency Framework, the F of the Paris Agreement, and what has FRA to do with it?
Thank you, Tina. First, a good day, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone attending. And I'd like to thank FAO very much for this invitation to be part of this panel. And I'm really happy to be able to participate in the discussions that we're going to have today. And I want to make use of this opportunity. Yes, we've been pretty much involved in the development of FRA 2020, and very pleased to have been so. So first, I would like to say congratulations to FAO and the FRA team for the recent successful launch of the FRA 2020. And, as you've presented, it's been a long process of hard work and dedication, not just by the FRA team alone, but by all the national correspondents. And national correspondents, of course, also come from countries that also report to the UNFCCC. So it's really, wonderful to see FRA 2020 in a tangible form where we can then have access to such data and information on forests. And, before I go into the details of the role of forests on the Enhanced Transparency Framework, or as we call it, the ETF of the Paris Agreement, I would like to highlight that we're actually really living in an era where transparency of data and information are first and foremost, and it's absolutely critical, the transparency of such data and information for effective decision-making at all levels. So this also applies to forests, and forests definitely play a very key role in all aspects of the Paris Agreement. And as you know, forests have also been recognized specifically in the Paris Agreement under Article 5. It recognizes specifically the role and contribution of forests, and not just by the actions of developing countries in their climate actions, but also by developed countries. And we know that in the nationally determined contributions of many, many countries, both developed and developing, they have recognized forests as part of their climate actions. And forests have a role in helping them, in facilitating them towards achieving their climate targets. So, and also not just forests, its role in mitigation but forests, its role in adaptation to climate change. So what is the Enhanced Transparency Framework, or the ETF? It was established by the parties of the UNFCCC to build mutual trust and confidence among all the countries, that are party to the Paris Agreement. And its aim is to promote effective implementation of climate actions specified by countries in the NDCs. And it builds upon existing MRV, or measuring, reporting, and verifying processes of the convention. And it serves to provide a clear understanding of what climate change actions are being taken, and in that sense, help countries to track progress in meeting what they have identified as part of their climate actions and commitments. So, and we know that, I've already started to say, I started by saying that we're living in an era of transparency of data and information. And it's true, the ETF, that countries are able to report their data and information transparently, accurately, completely, and to avoid duplication and avoid undue burden to parties, avoid double counting, and based on those principles of reporting to the UNFCCC, it brings us to the role of the FRA process. And we know that FRA presents a very comprehensive view of what the world's forest is like, its status at the moment, and the ways in which forests are changing. And I would say that, that the FRA process is the trusted and authoritative source of data and information relating to forests and forest resources. And the fact that this information and data is being reported by the countries themselves. And this also helps build confidence in the information that's being made available. And that leads to transparency of what is being reported. I would especially like to highlight one of the new tools of the FRA process, which is the FRA reporting platform. And I see that as a significant advancement in the FRA process for reporting information, because this definitely enhances transparency and helps countries to provide the most current data and information on forests and changes. And because it's out there on the platform, it's open to review by all stakeholders there, and that serves to increase motivation of countries to ensure the transparency, reliability, and accuracy of such data and information being reported. So in that process, it builds trust in the numbers being provided by the countries. And and we know, as part of the ETF process, countries need to provide a biennial transparency report as part of this MRV arrangement under Paris. And we need to bear in mind that the BTR, this biennial transparency report, while biennial, it's not a one-time report. And, one that a country does every 2 years. It has to be part of a process which countries need to build. It has to be part of a system that countries would need to build, so that it helps them to achieve both domestic and international goals which they have identified as part of their climate action. So I would say that the data and information that is being provided to the FRA process, and the status of the forest, the changes that forests undergoing each country, will help countries be able to track the progress towards the goals and objectives of the Paris Agreement. And in that sense, I would say this is how we're coming in. While the Secretariat doesn't use the data directly, we do coordinate the technical review process. So the current MRV system under the convention, as well as the reporting to Paris, will undergo technical reviews. And very often the technical experts that participate in these reviews they look to external sources of data and information to verify or check the consistency of data and coherence being reported by countries. And definitely one of the main reference sources and the most reliable and trusted, of course, is FRA. And, because it helps provide a big picture of what's happening in a region or a country, and also to have a better understanding of what's the drivers behind, in terms of deforestation and management of forests. So that's how we're using it a lot of times. It's a very critical source of information for the review processes. And I think at the same time, as part of reporting to FRA, countries also realize that, to avoid undue burden and not to duplicate information, what they report to the ETF and what they report to FRA in terms of forest reporting, that it helps and that they are not duplicating efforts, and that they look to these processes as a way of building the institutions and technical capacities that will ensure coherence and consistency in reporting across both processes. So I guess I've covered most of the main points on what FRA has got to do with the MRV processes of the UNFCCC, and namely the Paris Agreement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. And yes, indeed, very comprehensive manner you described it, but in a summary way. And indeed, highlighting the importance of transparency, that we are living in a different era of the needing to have data more transparent. And the countries are working to that. It builds trust. Also, really thank your recognition of highlighting that FRA is the trusted and authoritative official reporting process. So that's indeed a good recognition for us. Coming from another UN organization, which we obviously work very closely with you, and will continue this collaboration. And also thanks for the recognition, and then that you think it's very useful to have this new FRA platform that is really helping countries to do the reporting, and the sort of what were the connections between the reporting to UNFCCC and the reporting to FRA, that they need to be more consistent and systematic. So thank you for that. So dear panelists, thank you for this round, but do stay tuned, because there will be some questions that you may be asked at the end of this session. So we will come to that in a short while. So the first part of this webinar focused on the FRA 2020 experience, but let's have a quick look now at the plans for the future. So I'll give the floor to my colleague Anssi Pekkarinen, who leads the FRA process. Anssi, over to you.
Many thanks, Tina, and many thanks to our panelists for these insights. Many thanks to all the participants. I think that we have now roughly 110 people in this meeting. It's great to have you all here. Let me start by looking at the immediate next steps that the FRA has in the pipeline. First, we will continue with the finalization of the global remote sensing survey that was already mentioned. We will complete the data collection, quality control, and accuracy assessment, as well as reporting of the results. We hope that the first results will be ready by the next World Forestry Congress, which will take place in South Korea in May 2021. We will also immediately initiate evaluation of the FRA 2020 experience. And in addition to the feedback that we have already collected here, we will contact all the national correspondents, FRA advisory group, our collaborative forest resources questionnaire partners, and other stakeholders to understand that what could we do better in the future. We will also continue to work towards the already mentioned transparency, increased information exchange. This foresees organization of a number of workshops which focus on enhancing the networking and dialogue between different national focal points, including FRA national correspondents, national statistical offices, as well as UNFCCC focal points and REDD+ focal points where relevant. This work will be done in close collaboration under the umbrella of Capacity Building Initiative for Transparency, or CBIT Forest Project, funded by the Global Environment Facility, and focusing on making forest data transparent, accessible, and available in line with the Paris Agreement's enhanced transparency framework, as already described by Jenny. We will also continue working on improvements of the FRA platform, and especially its better integration with other data sources. In the future, the national correspondents will have an easier access to the latest geospatial data and products, as well as some tools for their analysis through the platform. Furthermore, we will further enhance the reporting experience. We will work on the data entry, review, analysis, reporting, and dissemination functionalities of the platform based on the user feedback that we have already received and we will receive. And finally, we have already started planning of the next expert consultation, which is an important part of the FRA process. It will bring together many leading experts of the world to discuss the scope of the next FRA and the potential change in the way the process is being implemented. Traditionally, these consultations have taken place in Finland, and I'm happy to inform you that we have already contacted the Finnish government and the Natural Resources Institute of Finland to see if they could host also the next consultation, which we foresee to take place in September 2021. Now, I mentioned the potential change in the implementation of FRA, and what is that then? I think that we have all seen that the need for timely and accurate information on forest resources is constantly increasing. To meet these needs, the current 5-year cycle of FRA may not be sufficient, and we need to look at the options for providing more frequent updates that could better serve our clients. This was also reflected in the latest meeting of the FAO Council that took place earlier this year, and the Council requested FAO to look at the financial and technical implications and positive and negative aspects of a 2-year and 5-year FRA cycles. And let's see that what do we need to consider when thinking about such a change. We have to look very, very carefully at the number of issues. First, we need to consider the scope of the assessment. If we were to conduct full FRA reporting every 2 years, that would require significant narrowing of the current scope of FRA, simply because we would not have enough time to collect, review, analyze, and report on the current set of 60+ variables. Second, we need to make sure that the changes that will be made will not significantly increase the reporting burden. Third, we need to consider the implications of these changes to the work of others. Those more than 300 national experts that are directly involved in the reporting process, as well as our CFRQ partners, RIA conventions, and the SDG process. The continuing commitment of our national correspondent network is key to successful FRA, and we need to make sure that we can support this network in the best possible way also in the future. Now, having seen this kind of background, let's look at some of the options that we have for future reporting. First, we could continue with the current scope and cycle with a question mark. This is a well-established process, and we would continue the work with the current level of resource. These are the positive sides of it. But the current cycle, as already said, does not meet the requirement for more frequent updates. Then, if we look at the full FRA reporting every 2 years, the positive sides of that would be that we would have more frequent results, and we could synchronize the cycle with the State of the World's Forest publication, which is one of the flagship publications of FAO. But as already said, this would require significant narrowing of the scope of FRA, as well as significant additional resources, because the workload would increase dramatically. But then we have a third kind of a hybrid option. That would be full reporting every 5 years, and volunteer annual updates. The positive sides of this are that it would allow FRA data to be better up to date. It would again result in synergies with the State of the World's Forest publication, and it would provide better support to other processes. And importantly, this would allow the countries that have new data to report those data to the FAO and FRA process immediately instead of having to wait for another 5 years or so. There's also a negative aspect here because it will require some additional resources as we would need to carry out the annual update and the 5-year cycle at the same time. So these are some of the options that I wanted to share you and discuss here. The discussion will also continue in our next week's COFO session, 4.2 on Monday. But before closing, please let me use this opportunity to thank all the national correspondents, their alternates and collaborators in the countries, as well as our partner organizations who have contributed to the FRA 2020 process. Without you, this would not have been possible. We are also grateful for the European Union, governments of Norway and Finland, and the Global Environment Facility for their financial support for different components of this work. Thank you all, and back to the chair.
Thank you so much, Anssi, for your presentation. Very comprehensive and very useful indeed. And in particularly is highlighting, giving a sort of a peek to the options that we will be discussing next week officially at the COFO session, as COFO members will guide us what will be the future of the FRA after 2020. Thank you, Anssi. That was very comprehensive. So we are actually very much on time with our event today, and we have a few questions coming from the questions, and please keep on posting those as we still have a little bit of time. Let me just see let me take the first question, and that's from Armando Alanis from the National Forestry Commission in Mexico. So the question is, will FAO organize some kinds of events along with countries members to disseminate the key findings of FRA 2020, as well as relevant results for each country? It would be a good opportunity to increase the reach of FRA 2020. I think, Anssi, that would go to you, so go ahead.
Thank you, Armando. This is a good question, and we are certainly looking into that, but we are also living in a very difficult period right now because of some of the restrictions that have been put in place because of the pandemic. One of the things that we have been thinking of is to have kind of regional FRA publications that would look into the specific of each and every region and using the data reported to FRA as a basis for that. That would allow these kind of regions to have more detailed analysis and to provide some insights to the situation in that particular area using FRA as a basis. So that is what is in the plan. Otherwise, I think that we will, what comes to the physical events, we need to follow up the situation, how it evolves, but we are certainly also looking at the virtual possibilities to disseminate the results as widely as possible.
Okay, thank you, Anssi. And colleagues, participants, please do continue to post your questions. We still have some time. Before I take the next questions, I would like to also alert our panelists that we will have a little bit time in the end. So please do be prepared to have one take-home message from your side, from your own presentation or what you have heard during this event. So one very brief take-home message I would ask you to have at the end of this panel. But let's continue the questions and answers. So I do have a question from the Youth Development Organization YODO in Cameroon, and the question is from Fai Kassian D from Cameroon. The question is, how has COVID affected your activities and what are the strategies to overcome the challenges of COVID-19? Probably also, Anssi, this is to you as it's about the FRA process.
Thank you, Tina. Thanks for the question. It's certainly, as you can imagine, this has changed the way that we work. Luckily, we had already completed the collection and the regional workshops for the FRA country reporting, but we found ourselves in the middle of the remote sensing survey data collection when the COVID started. And at that point, we had, if I'm not mistaken, planned 14 regional or national workshops to be carried out during this year. Because of the pandemic, we had to change our modality completely, and we developed a virtual training approach to this, or virtual training and data collection approach. And we have used that actually very successfully since the early March this year. And it has been really pleasant actually to see that this modality works well, because we can reduce the travel, and we can also see that it has impacted the distribution, gender balance of the participants of this process. And I'm happy to tell you that we have had more female participants in these virtual workshops that we have had in the physical events. So we managed to reinvent ourselves in a fairly short time, and I think that this virtual modality works well.
Thank you, Anssi. That is very good to hear. Obviously, all over the world, our organizations are suffering of this pandemic. The way we work have had to change, and this is very good to hear that these the workshops, remote workshops, are indeed working, and participation has been high. And happy to hear, obviously, that female participation has increased, and that's very good news. The next question is from Johnson, and this is with regard to proposal to increase the reporting frequency and therefore the costs. Are there any indications of continued or increased funding from FRA from the existing or new donors? Challenging question. Again, Anssi, could you take this one?
Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Johnson. Well, at the moment, we are still basically waiting for the COFO guidance on the way forward, that how to actually move on. But we have initiated the discussions with potential donors regarding the continuation after 2021, because currently we are covered until the end of next year. But we don't really have any kind of concrete indications yet, of course, because we haven't yet been able to make a concrete proposal. But I'm quite confident that the excellent collaboration that we have with the current donors will hopefully continue also in the future.
Okay, we have time, maybe 2 or 3 more questions. I see there's a question from Lev Hailey, and it goes like, countries are requested to produce data at the regional scale, and sometimes those requests come from the FRA regional office. Is there a possibility to put in place regional platforms that can use FRA national reports? Anssi, would you take this one again?
Thank you, Tina. Let me just understand the question better.
About the regional, is there a possibility to consider regional platforms? That's the essence of the question.
Well, that's somehow, if I understand the question correctly, that's actually something that we are doing with the CFRQ partners, because these are regional processes. And certainly, I mean, FRA being a process of collecting official national data from the countries allows also the regional level analysis. But if there are some specific, let's say, information needs at the regional level that are not covered by the FRA scope, then of course that would require some kind of an adjustment. I think that after the introduction of the FRA platform, we are certainly in better position to accommodate these needs also at the regional scale. I can't really reply to have an exact solution how that would work, but this is what I can say on this at the moment.
Okay, let me take one more final question, and then I'll ask, as I said, that I would ask our panelists to have really less than a minute take-home message to what you have presented or what you have heard today. But the final question from the audience is that if FAO is organizing any kind of training or capacity building regarding the FRA, please involve both main and the alternative national correspondent as well. Because if any of them got transferred, the memory will remain alive. This is from Rav Kumar Giri, Nepal, from the Forest Research and Training Center in Nepal.
I think that was for me as well.
Yeah, yes. But I promise this is the final one. The panelists. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chirio. This is an excellent point, and we are trying to keep our national correspondent and alternate database as well up to date as possible. But sometimes it happens that we kind of lose the track of the changes that are happening at the national level. But we will certainly do our best to involve both and to keep also our offices in the region or in the country copied so that they can help us to make sure that the invitation will reach
you. Okay, thank you, Anssi. So let me turn to our panelists once again. Maybe we'll take the reverse order, if that's okay with you. Let's start with Jenny. Jenny, what would be your take-home message from this event?
Thanks, Tina. Do you hear me clearly? Sort of.
Yes.
I mean,
yes,
on my screen,
well.
I see that I'm sort of frozen in the screen. But let me start with the message. The take-home message is, as I've already mentioned from the start of my remarks earlier, that we're living in an era of transparency. So it highlights and emphasizes the importance of up-to-date data and information, because such information from the forest sector will allow countries to make more informed decisions and would facilitate their policy decision making for whatever process that they intend to use such information for. And it also facilitates them to identify the most appropriate actions that they need to take. For example, climate actions and what they would like to use forests as part of their climate commitments. So, in the review processes of the convention that we're doing now, many technical challenges and capacity building needs of developing countries have been identified. And we know that reporting to the forest sector can be a very complex process. So I would like to say that, that the capacity building efforts of the FRA, as well as the new Civic Forest Transparency Project, will definitely help countries to build these capacities. And I think there were already several questions with regards to the need for more capacity building. And I think FAO's efforts to build such data collection, data analysis, and reporting capacities of countries for the forest sector will be very important, as well as helping countries set up the national forest monitoring system and building the necessary institutional arrangements to operate the monitoring system and then report later. And I'd like to end by saying that the UNFCCC and FAO will continue with our collaboration and working with each other to ensure that the reporting requirements, the data and information that will be provided to both processes will remain relevant and will help countries meet the objectives of both processes that they will be reporting to. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. It was a bit over 1 minute, but very useful indeed. We will have to, colleagues, we will have to stop at 12 o'clock sharp. So, so I would ask the three other panelists to try to limit to your intervention to 1 minute. So Belinda, over to you. 1 minute take-home message.
Okay, take-home message. I will be fast. The first will be connecting the connection or linking a translation between the FRA online reporting platform that we use to work right now with what the global remote sensing survey has so far. So because we have our own monitoring system, and that is the base for all reporting, including to the UNFCCC, including to the FRA. So there will be some connection on that. That's the first. The second, still thinking about how to maintain the more frequent reporting process, because that is the issue. When we have 5 years, but now becoming 2 years or voluntarily, there will be a big problem or big challenge on that. So I would like to stop my intervention with those two things. Tina, thank you.
Thank you so much, Belinda. Florence, 1 minute, take home message.
Yes, just through word, capacity building at the national level, control quality of data, and to ensure that there is not more turnover in the national level of different focal points. Thank you.
Very, very clear and sharp message. Thank you. Roman, the last key take-home message from the panelists. Roman, over to you.
Very brief, continue. I think that we have a very good system to discuss this and with participatory way. And only I want to echo other panelists that we also have to focus on foundations, which is a source national data. We cannot collect data that does not exist. And it is a very difficult process. It is a very time-consuming and resource-consuming process. And it needs a work on the whole sector, support countries, because still we have huge gaps that could be addressed only during a continuing and long-term work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Roman. Let me try to just very quickly summarize what I've heard today. I think all the partners in the panel were highlighting the key that the benefits to all of the collaborations through this collaborative forest resource questionnaire. Capacity development was clearly highlighted by basically every panelist and in the presentations, as well as from the many questions from the floor. And indeed, the capacity development has increased significantly during the 2020 FRA process, but we will take note that it does have to be very high in the future as well. And the FRA process seems to have become much more participatory. Ownership has increased by countries, and the reporting burden has decreased thanks to the new FRA platform and thanks to the digital innovations that we have used. And transparency, this FRA process obviously is helping the countries to increase the transparency of the data on their forests. And as I said, the ownership of the process has increased as the countries are the ones that actually report the data and validate that. I think we will stop here. We will continue a more official way during next week at COFO discussing the future of FRA. But with that, I would like to thank you all for the very active participation. Thank you for the audience participants. Many thanks to all the panelists. And thank you also all the colleagues in the FAO team and the World Forestry Week team to having organized this event. So thank you very much. And I will hand over to the next World Forestry Week event. Thank you very much.